Once upon a time, a young man named O'Neill lived in a village. He had big fields where he grew crops. But life was not always kind to him. When he was 2 years old, his mother passed away. His father loved him very much and raised him with care. But a few years ago, his father also passed away. Now, O'Neill was alone in the world. His father's best friend, Uncle George, cared for him. Uncle George often visited him. He had a kind wife, Laura, and a daughter, Kate. One night, O'Neill came home from work, tired and hungry. After washing his face, he went straight to the kitchen. He put a kettle on one stove for tea and started making sandwiches on the other. As he spread butter on the bread, he smiled.
If Mom were alive, I wouldn't have to worry about food.
But then his smile faded.
But she is not.
Just then, a knock came at the door. He turned quickly.
Maybe Uncle George? He hasn't come in days.
O'Neill wiped his hands and hurried to open the door. Uncle George stood there, smiling.
I have come to see you. If you don't mind.
Uncle George said warmly. O'Neill shook his head.
Uncle, don't say that. You are my only family.
He led Uncle George to the lounge, then rushed back to the kitchen. Soon, he returned with tea and sandwiches. Uncle George took a bite and smiled.
You cook well. O'Neill. Your wife will be lucky.
O'Neill laughed.
No. Dear Uncle. She will cook for me. I'm tired of all this.
Uncle George laughed. And they kept talking late into the night. One day, when O'Neill was busy with work, when he suddenly noticed some hairs on his shoulder, he wiped them away and thought,
Why is my hair falling?
He kept working. But the worry didn't leave his mind. That night, O'Neill lay on his bed, deep in thought.
I haven't cared for myself. I should focus on my health.
From that day, he made sure to eat well and take care of himself. But his hair kept falling. One evening, O'Neill went to a herbal store.
I need the best oil for hair. Mine is falling a lot.
The shopkeeper handed him a bottle.
This has coconut, olive, and almond oils. It's the best for you.
O'Neill paid and left. He started oiling his hair regularly. But it didn't work. One night, Uncle George came to visit. He looked at O'Neill and frowned.
Son. Your hair is falling so fast.
O'Neill sighed.
Yes. Uncle. I will be bald soon. I have tried everything, but nothing works.
Uncle George patted his shoulder.
Don't worry, son. Sooner or later, most men go bald. It's just a part of life.
Soon, O'Neill became completely bald and started wearing a wig. One night, George was sipping tea and said,
I want Kate to marry soon.
Laura asked.
Did you find a boy?
George smiled.
Yes. O'Neill.
Laura hesitated.
But he is bald now. I don't think Kate will agree.
George said firmly.
I have made my decision. That's final.
Later, Laura spoke to Kate.
Your father chose O'Neill for you.
Kate said,
No. I don't like him. He wears a wig. He is bald.
Laura sighed.
But this is your father's final decision.
Kate sighed and lowered her head. One night, George visited O'Neill's house. As he sipped his tea, he said,
O'Neill. I am your father's friend. I want you to marry. I have a proposal for you. But if you don't like it, you can refuse.
O'Neill smiled.
Uncle. Just say it.
George said,
I want you as my son-in-law.
O'Neill hesitated.
Uncle. I'm bald now. You should ask Kate. Maybe she won't like this proposal.
George waved his hand.
You just say yes.
O'Neill smiled.
I agree.
After some talking, George headed home. Soon, the wedding took place. That night, O'Neill removed his wig and sat beside Kate. Kate spoke.
My dad has forced me into this marriage. I want a divorce.
O'Neill was stunned.
But why?
Kate replied.
You know why. You are bald.
O'Neill felt hurt but stayed calm.
I can't hurt Uncle George. If you want to leave, you can.
He lay on the sofa. But sleep never came. Kate stayed distant. She cooked meals but never ate with O'Neill. One evening, O'Neill said,
Please sit with me.
Kate shook her head.
I want to sleep.
He sighed. One day, she said,
I'm leaving.
He nodded, though sadness filled his heart. At home, George said,
Kate. Go back to your home.
She replied,
If you won't let me stay, I will go elsewhere.
George stayed silent. Laura sighed. Kate went to her room. Days later, O'Neill arrived. He handed George some papers.
This is for Kate. I'm leaving for the city forever.
Then, he left. George gave the papers to Kate.
He loves you. He has given you all his property.
Kate was shocked. The papers slipped from her hands. She ran outside. O'Neill was walking ahead. She shouted.
O'Neill! Please stop!
He turned. She reached him, breathless.
Don't go.
O'Neill smiled sadly.
You only saw that I'm bald. You never saw my love.
Tears filled Kate's eyes.
I never valued your love before. I'm so sorry.
O'Neill smiled.
Let's go home.
Then, they returned to their home.